Okay, so let's unpack this. We're diving into a specific moment reported in the source material, May 30th, 2025, right there at the White House.
Yeah, the scene is President Trump publicly saying goodbye, sort of, to Elon Musk. Musk was stepping down from his official post as head of the Department of Government Efficiency, DOGE, as many people call it.
And right there, that's the thing, isn't it? The source material gives us this central tension immediately. It's a goodbye, sure, but President Trump is quoted saying Musk is not really leaving.
Right. And Musk himself confirms he'll stick around as an advisor. So leaving, but not leaving.
Exactly. So our mission here in this deep dive is to take these sources you've shared, pull out the key details, and really try to get a handle on what was going on.
We need to look at, well, the specifics of Musk's official role, these really big claims made about DOGE's success.
Huge claims.
And also the significant questions and, frankly, controversies that seem to swirl around his time there, all based on what's in the reporting.
It's about exploring those contrasts, isn't it? You've got the official high praise on one hand, and then these questions about the actual clear accounting of the savings they claimed.
And the whole departure versus staying on as an advisor thing, plus the blowback that DOGE and Musk apparently faced.
Yeah, it definitely paints a complex picture.
So for you listening, the question we're kind of wrestling with is, what can this situation, as described in the source material, teach us?
What does it tell us about, say, government efficiency efforts? Or about these prominent private figures stepping into public roles?
And maybe just about navigating conflicting information when you're presented with a story like this one. Okay, let's jump into that farewell scene itself.
Right. So the source puts us in the Oval Office, May 30th, 2025. President Trump, Elon Musk, together for this official moment.
And the material, it makes a point of noting Musk's clothes. He's wearing a black T-shirt.
Yeah, emblazoned with the DogeFather.
Huh. That's a detail that certainly caught the reporter's eye, it seems. It definitely stands out. And President Trump, according to the reporting, was just full of praise for Musk's work at DOGE.
What kind of language did he use?
Oh, things like sweeping and consequential, without comparison in modern history, credited him with delivering colossal change in the old ways of doing business in Washington.
Wow.
Okay.
Colossal change. That's pretty strong. And the source also notes Trump telling reporters the DOGE's work, it would actually continue, even after Musk officially left.
Yeah, and that Musk would, continue to guide it. So the formal title changes, but the connection apparently wasn't meant to end there.
Which I guess leads us to Musk's side of it. Why now? Why leave the official title at that moment?
Well, the reason given in the material is quite specific. It's about his status as a special government employee in SGE, basically a temporary advisor kind of role.
Okay.
If he stayed in that official capacity beyond 130 days, he'd face much stricter disclosure and ethics requirements.
130 days. Huh. That feels very precise. So this wasn't just him deciding I'm done. It was tied to a specific bureaucratic rule.
Exactly. That seems to be the reporting. Crossing that 130-day mark changes the game for SGEs. You either commit more formally, with all the stricter oversight that entails, or you step back from the official title.
Interesting. So how did Musk frame it? Did he see it as the end for DOGE?
No, not at all, according to the reporting. He apparently framed it as not the end, but more like at the beginning, said the team would grow stronger.
Okay, so the official role ends because of regulations, but the mission, in his view, carries on. Did he say anything else about why he was leaving or the context?
He reportedly did take a shot at those on the political left who would impede Trump's agenda.
Ah, okay.
The source also notes he declined to comment on a couple of other things floating around at the time. There was apparently a New York Times report alleging drug use or personal turmoil.
Right, I remember seeing headlines about that.
And also speculation trying to connect his departure to Tesla's situation, like tumbling sales figures. He didn't engage with those topics, according to the source.
So he kept his public comments, as reported anyway, focused on the timing rule for his exit and pushing back against opposition to the efficiency goals.
Got it.
Now, about those goals.
Yeah.
Reducing federal bureaucracy and spending. This is where the source really digs into some numbers that are well, let's just say they seem pretty contentious.
Absolutely. This is maybe one of the most striking parts of the reporting. The official claim from the White House and DOGE was huge, an estimated $175 billion in savings.
Wow, $175 billion. That is a massive number. Did they say where that came from?
Yeah, they apparently listed a whole bunch of categories, things like asset sales, contract lease cancellations and renegotiations, fraud and improper payment deletion, grant cancellations, interest savings, programmatic changes, regulatory savings, and workforce reductions. Pretty much touching everything.
Really broad scope then.
Very broad. But this is exactly where the source material immediately flags major questions. It points out the transparency, the methodology behind that $175 billion figure. It's been described by others looking into it as unclear accounting, even foggy.
Foggy.
And repeatedly questioned.
So what was unclear or foggy about it, according to the source? What was missing?
Well, the reporting suggests the detailed breakdown, or maybe the specific math they used to get to $175 billion, wasn't really made public in a way that let people easily check it. In fact, the source points out that the publicly available, verifiable savings figures, well, they added up to less than half of that massive $175 billion claim.
Less than half. Wow. Okay. And wasn't there another number cited in the source? Something from Reuters?
That's right. The source brings up an analysis by Reuters. They looked at U.S. Treasury summaries and came up with a much, much lower figure for cuts, actually achieved something around $19 billion.
$19 billion. Okay.
Now, Reuters did apparently note that some kinds of savings might take time to actually appear in those Treasury reports, so a caveat there.
Still, $19 billion versus $175 billion claimed. That's an enormous difference. And didn't the source also remind us what Musk's original goal was when DOGE first kicked off?
It does. His stated ambition right at the start was $2 trillion.
$2 trillion. So, okay, goal's $2 trillion. Claim becomes $175 billion. Outside analysis points to maybe $19 billion. With caveats, that's quite a range. How did Musk respond to this discrepancy, according to the source?
Well, the material reports that when he was asked about the gap between the claim and the lower figures, he maintained that $1 trillion in savings was still a long-term goal.
$1 trillion, okay.
Yeah, and he expressed confidence that the true impact would be seen over time.
So the picture the source paints is one of really high ambition, huge claim numbers, but also these significant nagging questions from outside about the transparency and the actual verifiable results.
Precisely. And that lack of clarity around the numbers, combined with the sweeping mandate DOGE had, probably fed into the next thing the source highlights, the blowback and the controversies.
Right. They were described as lightning rods for public criticism. Wasn't that the phrase?
It was. And it wasn't just abstract complaints. The source points to actual sweeping changes implemented since January. Things like funding cuts and staffing reductions reported at places like USA.
So real impacts that people felt.
Definitely. And the material details how this led to the actual opposition. Lawsuits were apparently filed.
By who?
Various groups, government employees, contractors, labor groups, even some state officials apparently, trying to challenge or block what DOGE was doing. The success of these lawsuits reportedly varied.
So the efficiency drive wasn't just happening on paper. It had real-world consequences that sparked legal fights.
Yeah.
The source also mentioned conflict inside the administration. Is that right?
Yeah, apparently there were reports suggesting behind-the-scenes conflict, Musk sometimes clashing with members of Trump's own cabinet.
Yeah.
The source even speculated that maybe some cabinet members were perhaps hoping for a bit of relief from DOGE's directives once Musk formally stepped down.
Huh. So pushback from outside, potential friction inside. What about the impact on Musk's own companies? Did the source touch on that?
It did. It notes that his very visible government role seemed to create blowback for his businesses, too. There were reports of protests at Tesla dealerships, for example.
Right.
And the material points out Tesla's profits took a big hit, plunging 71% in the first 3 months of that year.
71%. Wow.
Yeah. And apparently some shareholders were starting to call for Musk to, get back to focusing full-time on running the company.
So the ripple effects of this government job spread pretty far beyond just D.C., it seems.
It certainly looks that way, based on the reporting. Finally, the source touches on Musk's own take, his reflection on this whole period in the official role.
How did he frame it? Was it worth it, in his view?
Well, his answer when asked that directly was apparently somewhat circumspect, not a simple yes or no.
Okay. What did he say?
He apparently felt that DOGE, and maybe he himself, had kind of become seen as a boogeyman. that they were getting blamed for all sorts of government overhaul efforts, even maybe ones they didn't directly initiate.
So the perception maybe got bigger than the specific actions, in his view.
That seems to be the suggestion in the source. But despite those challenges and that boogeyman feeling, the material reports he doubled down on staying involved.
How so?
By specifically saying he'd continue to be a friend and advisor to the president.
Okay.
And his final reflection, as reported, was that the whole experience was an important thing, a necessary thing, and he believed it would ultimately have a good effect in the future.
Which, yeah, brings us right back to where we started, doesn't it?
It really does. With President Trump emphasizing the relationship wasn't truly over, saying Musk is really not leaving, he's going to be back and forth.
Yeah. So let's recap. We've traced this arc from the official farewell for the structured government role through these sky-high claims of savings, but paired with very real questions about how those savings were actually calculated and verified.
Right. The $175 billion versus maybe $19 billion.
Then the significant blowback and controversies DOGE and Musk faced, both outside and reportedly inside the administration.
And the impact on his businesses.
Right. And finally, this clear signal reported in the source material that even with a formal departure, a less structured but potentially still very influential advisory role was expected to continue.
It's definitely a situation packed with contrasts and complexities, all laid out in the source material you brought.
It certainly leaves you, the listener, with a lot to mull over. I mean, think about those vastly different figures for government savings, the $175 billion claimed versus the $19 billion suggested by the Reuters analysis using Treasury data, not to mention the initial $2 trillion goal.
Right.
What does that huge gap suggest to you about the challenges of actually evaluating these kinds of efficiency initiatives? Or maybe about how progress gets measured or even just reported when you have private figures stepping into these kinds of public service roles?
It really raises some fundamental questions, doesn't it? Questions about transparency, about accountability, and just how hard it is to quantify impact in these massive, complex systems like government, all based on the different angles presented in the source material itself. What does that tell you?